Welcome back to Ripe Avocados, episode 23. Today, we've got yet another horror movie. It is Heretic, starring Hugh Grant. And before we jump into the song, I just want to give a shout out to those of you who have subscribed to our YouTube, giving us a follow on TikTok and our other socials. We do appreciate it. If you do like the content that we're putting out, continue to leave a thumbs up, leave a comment, give us shit if you have shit to talk. We love all the comments. We enjoy everybody that enjoys movies as much as we do. So with that being said, let's get into it. Episode 23. We're gonna dissect the fuck out of this horror movie.
Daydream, I fell asleep amid the flowers for a couple of hours on a beautiful day. Daydream.
All right, so the movie Heretic, it follows two missionaries, Sister Paxton and Sister Barnes, and they're on their mission to spread the word about Mormonism. And they come across Hugh Grant, who lives in this like Hansel and Gretel type house. And
That's a good comp. I did not even think of that until now.
yeah, and he seems very charming at first, and it all starts going downhill when they start having a back and forth really about religion, what it means to believe in something, and he really tests their fate throughout this whole movie. And it's basically just Jigsaw if he wanted to question Mormons the whole time. And Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton are really put to the test throughout this movie because Hugh Grant is just a fucking psychopath. And he really wants to get his point across about how you should be questioning what you truly believe in and what not to believe in.
He wants to get his point through the throats of both of these women for no reason other than the fact that they're religious, I guess.
Yeah, and his method of getting that point across is with a box cutter and human trafficking. But
yeah, so there's a lot to dive into here. I think that it's a pretty interesting note that both of these women, both of these actresses, we should give them a shout out as we get into the characters. So Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East, they actually both were raised Mormon. And
I did not know that.
Yeah, they're not Mormon anymore though, so
Yeah.
that probably answers our question about
Well,
the
we
entire
saw
movie.
that with Sister Barnes and her Nexaplon, like her birth control in her arm thing. But
Yeah, and the ridiculous amount of pornographic questions in the opening scene of the movie from Sister Paxton. But that being said, I really think the characters in this movie drove the entire thing. I went 9.1 here for characters.
damn, I mean, honestly, that's not far off from what I had for characters. I just went 8.0 flat. I thought they were fantastic. It wasn't like characters that I'm going to rave about in the next couple of years. You know, I'm never
Not
gonna
Sister
be,
Paxton?
dude. I don't think I'll ever bring up Sister Paxton and Sister Barnes in another conversation, really. Besides like this movie, but I thought they were badass. Don't get me wrong. And like I said, I
Okay.
literally thought Hugh Grant was like Jesus Jigsaw in himself. Like, he was fucking insane. Also, how much renovation has that man done to his house since he
Yeah.
first bought it? Like, what the fuck is that about?
Yeah, that whole time to door thing was very odd. It was very eerie and everything. I'm gonna really step on this though. I think the characters were excellent, and I'm gonna get into it. Like, we had three main characters, which I love. Not an overindulgence of characters, as we know. We have two Mormons who are trying to like sell this. They're not like doing this. They're trying to sell the religion to a potential believer. And Hugh Grant is just a creep from the moment we meet him. He's posing as this nice guy. We knew from the get-go his wife was not in the other room. I kind of spoiled this with the trailer of this movie. There's this whole blueberry pie fiasco where the Mormons can only enter a home if a woman is present, which I didn't even really know. And
I didn't know.
Side note about this movie, I learned a lot about Mormonism that I didn't know beforehand. And not that I'm a devout religious person, but I was raised Christian or Protestant for that matter. But Mormons have this negative stigma attached to them and whatnot. A lot of that has to do with like the polygamous relationship aspect. At least that's what I've heard from it, and I've seen
also
some of this more.
The like newest religion, I believe, or at least one of them. Like it's very recent.
Yeah, it's a newer rendition of Christianity, and a lot of people just aren't as big a fan of it. But whatever, that's sort of like what this whole movie gets into. Nonetheless, we have Sister Paxton, who is this. The thing I would best describe her as is just very pure. She's extremely innocent.
Yes.
I don't know if you caught this. There's not one swear in this entire movie, and it's rated
Good.
R. Well, that's on purpose because it's against the Mormon religion to swear. It's against probably most religions to swear, but that was a really cool piece that I thought was tied into it. Obviously, that's more to do with the writing, but Sister Paxton is very polite, even to this man who is basically abducting her and trying to change her mind about her beliefs while like psychologically controlling her and enslaving her. I don't know what his long-term plans were.
Yeah.
But we see her development change throughout the whole movie, where Sister
Barnes, Margaret Thatcher.
I'm mixing up the actor. Yeah, Sister Barnes is definitely more hard-nosed.
Yeah.
She brings up how she's from Philly, and once the two girls are kind of recognizing that what is going on, and it's Sister Barnes that notices it first, because Sister Paxton is so innocent that she just sort of assumes that Mr. Reed, who is Hugh Grant's character, is just not this complete creep that he's alluding to be. She just only sees the like good in people.
Well, but actually, sorry to cut you off there, but I do want to touch on that a little bit because honestly, the more you're talking about it and the more you're pleading your case for how good these characters are, I'm kind of agreeing with you here because they did such a good job about that because, like you said, they lay it out where Sister Barnes is the hard-nosed one, right?
Yeah.
Even just the character design, the dark hair, like, she just seems like she's from Philly, like a little bit more rugged, whereas you said Sister Paxton is like the glasses on, hair tied back, like very put together, very innocent. But to your point, they make it seem like Sister Barnes is the one picking up on all these things. But at the end of the movie, you realize Sister Paxton was picking up on these things. She was just trying to brush it to the side a little bit. Like when Hugh Grant comes in from outside having the wet hair, she notices that he went outside to move their bikes. She's like, why is his hair wet? So it is the balance of the character is really nice. And sorry to cut you off there.
No, you're fine. It's a bit of both. You can always change your score too if you want to make it closer to mine. But she has this whole arc, right? She starts out very innocent, and she's still I think she's still very innocent at the end, but her character becomes super jaded. And a lot of it has to do with Sister Barnes telling her, hey, I can't cut this guy's throat because he's got his eyes on me, so you have to be the one to do it. She gives her the scalpel or whatever the sharp thing is that she ends up stabbing Hugh Grant with, and she tells him that she has to be the one to start like fucking with him because all Hugh Grant's trying to do is get mental like domination over these women by disproving things about their religion, which a lot of them, when I looked it up on Reddit, a lot of the facts he was giving about them were like incorrect examples. That it's kind of funny that a lot of the arguments in this movie are just what people would probably do on Reddit arguing about religion. It's all mind-numbing shit that just...
He went on Reddit for like 10, 15 minutes and just collected all the facts he could that like
Yeah.
anyone is sourcing, and then he was just like, I'm gonna run with this.
Right. So again, back to the characters. So Sister Paxton has this whole character arc where she becomes a badass, but we see it's influenced by Sister Barnes and also by Mr. Reed, causing her to just survive, basically. Mr. Reed comes off as this very innocent man, but or not innocent. He just comes off as like somewhat nice, but very sinister early on when he's just getting very creepy with them. And then he becomes kind of a pathetic piece of shit. He's he's just a big pussy, and he eventually says to them in probably the climax of the movie, he says to Sister Paxton, I did all this because you didn't stop me.
Yeah.
And he's just doing it to women who are feeble because he's malnourishing them, and he's just picking very easy targets because he's a pussy. And you realize that he's not some just sinister, overpowering serial killer. Well, not that any serial killer is some big macho dude for the most part. They're a lot of the time they're just picking victims that they know that they can overpower and whatnot. And you see him turn too when you kind of find out more about him. Sister Barnes though is so consistent throughout the whole thing, and I think the way she plays off of Sister Paxton is so awesome because she recognizes that she has to say these things to her. And if Sister Barnes wasn't the one with her, if there were two Sister Paxtons, they both would have died, probably. It would have been...
Well, to be honest, if there were two Sister Paxtons, he might have just enslaved them or whatever he was doing with those women, and, like, we would have had a sequel with Sister Paxton in the basement.
Yeah, it would have been something like that, or if there were two Sister Barnes, it would have been two dead women, probably pretty immediate, too. But... I just thought it was very clever how all the characters played off of one another, and there was such a huge amount of depth to Sister Paxton's character especially. The one line I wrote down that was so fucking funny was when they finally pick one of the doors that they go through, and she like thanks him for their service and does like a little curtsy. It was so fucking funny. She like didn't know what to do. Her mind was like freaking out, and that's probably like when it flipped for her. Also, when she just sees her friend's throat slit, that was probably a jarring moment, obviously, and we really see her start to really go into flight or flight mode from that point forward. So, I really just thought the characters carried the movie in like a really good way. So,
no, 100%. And as you said, honestly, I might have to bump characters up to an 8.5. The more that we're talking about. I don't know if it breaks into the 9 range for me, but like these characters were fucking amazing. And as you said, the character arc that Sister Paxton takes is incredible. As like you think Sister Barnes is going to be the one to get out of everything, and the fact that she dies like with 20 minutes left in the movie, and Sister Paxton then carries the load and just goes completely badass, while still also remaining like the innocent girl that she is just a beautiful ending. And like I'm so glad she shanked Hugh Grant in the mouth. Like
it was like a polite stabbing in the back.
Yeah, it was.
He like snuck up on her, tried to be like a creep, and she like, you know, gets him in the jugular. Also, the scene where she's literally like, she has the one monologue that was very, again, her character's just so pure. She's talking about how she's just disproving Hugh Grant's theories about why he's wrong. And she admits that prayer is like a beautiful thing because it doesn't really do anything, but it's the idea that you're helping and wishing good things upon other people. It's just a selfless act. I don't remember exactly the words that she uses, but it's something along those lines. And then after she's stabbed by Hugh Grant, all she's doing is literally praying all hope is lost, and then a dead girl literally comes to her rescue and saves her. It's just like I just thought that scene of her like actually praying, not giving a shit in the world about what was going to happen was an awesome scene.
Yeah.
And it just shows the epitome of her character.
I have a question about that final scene to you, and I don't know if we want to save it to writing or we want to just
We
get
can-
into it right now.
We can move on to the cinematography. Also, shout out Topher Grace. I did not
fuck
realize
yeah.
that was him until I went on IMDb. It kind of looked like him, obviously, but it was... I don't know why the fuck they used him. They also had a Spider-Man reference
Oh yeah, Eddie Brock,
in the
bro.
movie.
Eddie Brock.
Yeah, Eddie Brock.
But yeah, we'll save the... We'll save... Nah, fuck it. I'm just going to talk about it now real quick. I just had a question for you. Do you think Sister Paxton actually made it out alive in the end?
I do, because the whole spiel about what Hugh Grant was talking about when the prophet died and went to the other side, she saw like white clouds and whatnot, and then she realized that she wasn't dead or something along those lines. I think the fact that she saw the butterfly on her hand was her probably going... It was just like a hallucination. I think we're supposed to see... It's obviously up for interpretation, the ending. It's not supposed to be like, oh, she's definitely out. But I think the fact that she sees the butterfly on her hand... She talks about it earlier in the movie, how if she wanted to be reincarnated, it would be as a butterfly, and she would want to land on somebody's hand.
Yeah,
But-
a loved one's hand to make sure they
On the
knew
loved
that
one's hand.
she was still
Yeah,
there.
I think that was probably Sister Barnes, if she was imagining it.
So that's the thing. That was initially what I thought. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Now, the reason why I posed that question, though, is because during the movie, Hugh Grant's character talks about that Chinese philosopher about the butterfly dream, where he fell asleep and dreamed about being a butterfly, and he was so free and all these things. And then he woke up and then was like, oh, it was just a dream. But then he was like, wait a second, what if I'm actually a butterfly and I'm free, and now I'm just dreaming that I'm a man? So that made me think like, okay, what if that was alluding to the idea that Sister Paxton didn't actually survive, but that was her dream of like escaping, and the butterfly like being there and then disappearing right away was like that whole notion of like, she's still dead, but like in her mind somehow like her prayers were answered and all this stuff. I don't know. I just feel like it might be a stretch, but I feel like there's definitely two possibilities for that ambiguous ending. It's definitely more of a stretch, but also you got to think like Sister Barnes, her throat was slit and she died in like 2 minutes. Like she was out cold on the dead. Like the fact that she resurrected herself and had enough power to swing that wooden board with the nails in it into Hugh Grant's head to kill him, and then Sister Paxton, who was also stabbed in the stomach, is able to crawl out and escape. Both sides, like, trust me, I hope that Sister Paxton survived at the end of that movie, because I wanted her to survive. I wanted both to, of course. But I also think it's nice that it's a little bit ambiguous and makes the viewer think a little bit about what really could have happened at the end there.
Yeah, I think she did, because I don't know. I'm just gonna repeat what I said before. It was obviously ambiguous on purpose, but I do think she does. And there's also evidence too of people. I think when people are just mispronounced dead initially, and it's shown that Hugh Grant is just using these other enslaved women as props, because I doubt he's like an expert on actually identifying dead and alive people. It doesn't even seem like he does a good job of doing this when Sister Barnes is dead. He just says, oh, she has this implant in her, so she's obviously not able to be resurrected. Like he just
he basically calls her like an NPC. But again, it's so good because he's hoping that Sister Paxton is innocent enough to not know what that is.
Yeah.
But again, Sister Paxton's character development, and as she like unfolds as a character throughout this movie, you're like, okay, maybe she's not as innocent as she's playing herself out to be. I'm not saying she has had sex or anything like that, but she clearly knows that that was some form of birth control, like a Nexaplon.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. I saw another thing on Reddit where Hugh Grant wanted to kill Sister Barnes from the get-go because they make a point of him noticing the contraceptive device in her arm when they're first sitting down. So
I
I
feel
think
like
he just probably identified her as the biggest threat, which
100%.
Sister Barnes knows.
100%.
Yeah. So let's get onto the cinematography because we're kind of touching on those examples here. I gave this a 7.0.
I gave cinematography a 7.5.
Yeah, this is the lowest score I had for the movie, and it wasn't anything bad. It just wasn't hyper focused on this aspect, in my opinion. We had some cool shots. I wanted to bring up this general note. I think we should start nerfing the cinematography scores in horror movies or give it a slight curve because it's such a cheat code to make these very jump scary and creepy and whatnot versus like a comedy or just a normal drama. I think it's just the fact that it's a horror movie, it makes the elements a little more effective in my opinion. I wrote down some examples like we obviously have the pitter patter on the bikes of the rain starting to fall, which I thought was like one of the cooler examples that doesn't necessarily put it into the horror only category in terms of like it being effective because this signified the start of the storm or whatever. Like
Yeah.
we literally hear it beginning, and I love shit like that where they don't have to explain, okay, it's raining now, so the girls can't just bike home or whatever.
Yeah.
That whole thing about them just biking was fucking crazy to me that they didn't have a car or whatever, but I don't know enough about
I mean,
LV.
I think Mormons are like always riding on bikes. I fucking
Yeah.
take walks around my neighborhood and I see some dudes in a button-up shirt and slacks riding on bikes, and I'm like, look at those Mormons go.
That's funny. So I also saw something else online too, which was cool costume design. So they take the name tags off again when they're inside,
Yeah.
and Mormons have to wear two sets of them. If they have like a jacket on, they have to wear a name tag on their jacket and then a name tag on their shirt. And I think they did that right in the movie, but they might have skipped over that step. But
They might have taken it. Did they take it off their jacket, and then when they gave their jackets, they put it back on their?
yeah, it
shirts?
was something like that. They made a point to have the name tags though, and they made a point to have these. I thought the outfits were very on point too, and the house was a cool little hole in the wall. That's probably not the right word to describe it. It's not cool, but very reminiscent of
very
Hansel and
cool.
Gretel. Yeah, very very Hansel and Gretel-y. And then this is the second time A24 has used these miniatures, obviously Hereditary, but I didn't even really think the miniatures did it for me in this movie. I never really understood why he had to have that in there, to be honest.
I think
just kind of seemed like a throw
yeah,
in.
again, it was just like a cool like jigsaw like maze runner type like fixture in the house that he has, just so they could do those cool pan shots where it's like right over it and you can see the character running through, or like he's
Yeah.
placing the characters in certain places. I think it was cool that like at the start when they first go down where they think they're getting out and they go down into that basement, it's clearly Hugh Grant placing the characters there because he feels like he's in control of it all. But then towards the end, when they show that fixture and you see Sister Paxton like going through the different places, it's her character moving on her own. She's not being the one controlled. She's now
Yeah.
doing her own controlling.
That's a good point. I mean, it looks very cool. It
Yeah.
just to me it seemed like kind of just a copycat of Hereditary. Whereas that one is a little more effective in my opinion because it's like a supernatural element overlooking that house, like the demonic presence of that cult or whatever. But anyways, it was still pretty solid in my opinion. It wasn't anything like bad. But overall the cinematography elements weren't they weren't phenomenal or trying to break any bounds in my opinion. We had the renditions of Creep by Radiohead, so they incorporated these songs into the script as well. Another funny thing is that he asks Sister Barnes, this is just another piece of trivia, he asks Sister Barnes like one of her, I don't think it's a fear, he just asks her something she's not confident about, and she says like she's not a good singer or whatever, and she sings one of the renditions of the song in in the outlude or the outro part of the movie. Like during the end credits, there's another rendition of the song, and that's actually her singing it. So
Oh, really? That
was another cool little tidbit.
Talking about bad renditions, fucking Hugh Grant's Jar Jar Binks impression was maybe one of the worst impressions I've ever heard.
Yeah, I was not expecting to get that in
No.
in this movie, a Phantom Menace reference in a Hugh Grant horror
Yeah.
movie, but nonetheless, it was still pretty good. The whole two-door element in that first church room was really creepy. But like I mentioned too, we have this like random statue of a man in the hallway, which is supposed to look creepy.
Yeah.
But it's just a horror movie. I think that stuff is just very... It should just be nerfed. It's
Played out.
Yeah, I've
it's
just
still
seen
creeping
it so
out,
many
though, I'm
times.
not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's creepy, but again, I could fucking do that. Like, I see these things on Instagram.
Dude, tally
of
behind
people...
me. If I turn the lights off, it just...
Yeah, and just put some lights behind the eyes. Like, it would look creepy, you know? But I just think creating aspects of horror in terms of using darkness is not something that's that challenging to do. It's done in horrible horror movies, but this is not a horrible horror movie. I just think it's should go without saying that those things are very hand in hand and kind of easy to make. So,
Yeah. The cinematography score for me was in the same ballpark. It was 7.5.
yeah.
As you said, it's nothing it's nothing out of this world, but I feel like everything they did made sense for this movie. So I feel like a 7.5 is like a fair score for that.
Yeah.
To your point on the two doors, I did like that addition because I feel like that's something that's always brought up in those like hypothetical conversations where it's like, okay, you have two doors to choose from. One goes to heaven, one goes to hell. And like you can ask the person one question and they have to say the truth, but like you don't know which door goes to where. And I love the fact that both doors just go down into hell pretty much, like right into the basement. But I thought that was like a cool little addition there because again, it just makes it way creepier.
It does.
And Hugh Grant over there dressed like fucking Mr. Rogers. It's like,
Yeah.
bro. Is that who I'm thinking of? It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood? Yeah.
Kind of Mr. Rogers. He doesn't really look... He has a very odd... He kind of looks like a grandpa, like a middle-aged grandpa, but nonetheless, it's effective in its own right, I guess. But moving on to writing, I give this another high score. I went 8.2 here. I don't know.
My writing score was an 8.1, so we're right in the same ballpark. The more we talk about this movie, it's funny. I watched it. I came out of it. I was like, I thoroughly enjoyed that, but did I enjoy it that much? And the more I talk about it, the more I research on it, the more I look into it, I come to love the movie more and more, honestly.
We talked about the profanity part, not having that. I thought that was a genius little touch there. It's hard to do that in a horror movie, too, because of all the crazy shit that's going on. It's kind of hard for the characters not to react a certain way, but it just goes back to the characters being amazing and not steering away from their values and who they are.
No, I 100% agree, because they could have easily thrown in like a crowd pleaser line, like Sister Paxton finally stabbing him, being like, fuck you, bitch. But instead, like, they kept her true to her character, but also had her have this beautiful character arc.
Yeah, and we'll notice that shit too. We would have knocked it down 5 points if they had one swear in it. This fucking stupid ass movie. If they did that, I would have lost my fucking mind. So, there's some plot holes though. Like Barnes, I don't know how she didn't fucking die. That was crazy.
Well, so that's the thing. It bodes the question: did she die? And we don't know. We don't know.
We don't know. So it wasn't like the worst knock. Like it was kind of a plot hole, but it could not be a plot hole. I really thought the bikes were just going to be a plot hole, but I think that's the only reason Topher Grace is in the movie, is to
show that the bikes
check.
were moved. Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought if he walked out and didn't see the bikes, but they wrote that all in, which wasn't even lazy. I think that was just a really good way to remove that plot hole. And they also show Hugh Grant, going back to the miniatures that I was kind of shitting on before, they show Hugh Grant having Topher Grace's character at the door at the house. So he like anticipated somebody to come looking for the girls, and that whole piece was covered up for, which was nice because it would have been a glaring problem with the whole story if that wasn't accounted for.
Yeah. Well, it also makes you question, like, okay, how much? Well, we know all the women he has captured, so it's like he's clearly perfected this plan of like capturing women, making sure it just seems like they're gone, and he has no idea of it. Honestly,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, there were a couple plot holes, and honestly, I would have to think on it a little bit more. I don't know if you have any more, but I will say one thing about the writing was there were a number of scenarios where it's like, I love this because they are thinking with their heads here. Not like they're in a horror movie, but like in the beginning, it is a little drawn out how long they stay in Hugh Grant's house. But like after a certain point, they're just like, he goes down that creepy hallway and they're both standing in the doorway. They're like, let's get the fuck out of here. Like,
Yeah.
we should leave. So like the fact that they're trying to get out right away, and then they mention that the bikes are locked to the fence, and they're like, oh shit, the key is in the jacket. And you think they would have to go back for the jacket, but they're like, screw it. I'd rather just walk home in the rain. Like, fuck this. I'm not staying in this house any
Yeah,
longer.
they're like
but
2
then
miles,
of course,
that's fine.
yeah, but then of course the door is locked. So it's like, I'm glad they didn't do the whole like, okay, well, let's go get our key. They're like, nah, fuck this. Like, let's get the fuck out of here. But then, of
did
course,
make
like,
sense.
yeah, so everything's kind of covered up. The bike thing with Topher Grace's character. Like, you think, as a viewer, you're like, wait, when he comes, he's going to see those bikes. And then when he approaches the door, you're like, is he going to, like, he should have seen the bikes on the way in. Why isn't he mentioning that? And he comes back and just hands him the booklet. But then, of course, when he finally leaves, you see the bikes aren't attached to the fence anymore. So it's like,
Yeah.
I
That
fucking
scene
love
was-
that.
That scene was cool too because there's a lot of misogyny in the Mormon church, or those are the negative things told about it. I'm not saying every Mormon's a misogynist, but at least this is just shit I've read on Reddit too, because I'm not a Mormon. But
You're Hugh Grant, basically.
yeah, I'm just as smart as him. I forget what Sister Paxton says to him. She's like, "Mr. Reed, you're so brilliant," or something. But no, like the one plot hole I can think of though, why didn't they just try and like beat him up?
That was my thing, I guess. Like, and they definitely should have just attacked him right at the start, or just like stayed up top till light. Maybe I don't know. Like, there were a couple things, but I think they were just scared. They just wanted to get out, and I
Yeah.
guess they were just gonna try to hope that like going downstairs into this creepy basement with like 100 stairs would get them out of there. But again, I guess that's just that's the whole point of that movie, the blind faith that they have in whoever they believe, whether it's God,
And
whether
their
it's
religion.
Mr. Reed. Exactly. Yeah. It's like, okay, we're just gonna believe that this is gonna get us out of here without us having to kill someone.
Yeah, and that's sort of my stance on it too. I do think that would have made sense for them to try it, but it also does kind of make a lot of sense that they wouldn't and hope that it gets better. But obviously, he's picking his targets. If you and I were in this fucking room trying to sell him on Mormonism and he said this shit to us, we would have just attacked him.
Oh,
And-
bro, I would have John
wouldn't-
Jones spinning back kicked him in the ribs.
Right,
You
like,
would have
he's
put him in
not
a
a-
full Nelson.
He's not an imposing figure. He's like a 60, I think Hugh Grant's like 64 or 63 years
Yeah.
old, and he's not he's probably bigger than them, but these aren't like 10-year-old children. I think their characters are between like 18 to 20ish. So they're pretty they're obviously able-bodied. But they could probably have overpowered him, but Sister Paxton's not very violent until she commits murder in his basement. But aside from that, it does just all kind of align with what we've been taught by Hugh Grant about how the one true religion is just control, and it's super dark and it's pretty scary because of how realistic it comes off, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, he's literally able to just do all this because people don't challenge him. So
Yeah. One thing
makes you
I
think.
do want to ask you is, Did you? So I fucking love the fact that this wasn't a supernatural movie. I
Yeah.
love the fact that he was just a psychopath trying to like push his control onto like women that he felt like he could control and like capture them in his basement and push this like belief he has that like he's a god himself almost. I saw a lot of people online saying they wish this went like a supernatural route, and
Yeah.
me personally, I completely disagree with that. Like, I love the fact that because I hate movies like that. I despise long legs for going down that route.
I saw a thread that was describing that Longlegs and Heretic should have their third act switched, and
Really,
it wasn't a total upvote fest. A lot of people were shitting on the comment, myself included. But I'm with you. I don't think it should have been supernatural. I think it worked the way it was.
Yeah.
Because supernatural would have just taken religion, the whole religion theme out of it. Because
yes,
religion's a belief. It's not. Everyone knows that magic isn't real and all this shit, unless you like believe in ghosts or whatever. I don't believe in ghosts. That doesn't really have anything to do with religion. But I just think it would have taken away from the theme of the whole movie, and it was good that it didn't do that. It's about as
100%.
good as you could write a horror movie. I know we just talked about The Substance. This movie is definitely better than The Substance in my opinion.
Oh, I
But
loved it more than a substance. Yeah.
they're both well written. Like for what they're worth, they're horror movies. They're exaggerations, but this could fucking happen for sure. Some example of it probably has happened. Sadly, maybe we'll never know about it, or I don't know. Sometimes these movies are taken after real life examples, but I didn't see any evidence of that online. But
I think it was good too that they didn't add the supernatural element because, as you were saying, it would have ruined the whole theme of religion and belief. Like, and it would have ruined the character arc for Sister Paxton. Like, she's stuck to her guts and she's stuck to her belief and faith throughout the whole movie, and you see her praying at the end because of that. But like, if there was a supernatural element, it would have ruined her actually overcoming Hugh Grant's character.
yeah, obviously she would have believed the fucking Santeria type shit if she saw someone
Yeah.
levitating from the ceiling or something.
Right.
Ridiculous. I don't know. I mean, the people that he had malnourished in his basement were really fucking weird looking. I thought that might have been some sort of supernatural thing, but it was just him mistreating them and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
anyways, moving on to entertainment, I gave this an 8.0.
I gave it an 8.5.
Okay.
I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. Honestly, the more we talk about it, I could see my score inflating a little bit, but I don't know if I want to right now. I don't know if I want to inflate it right now. I'm gonna stick with an 8.5 for this, but I definitely would recommend it to a lot of people. Again, it's just one of those things. As you mentioned, I learned so much more about Mormonism in this one movie than I ever have. Like, the closest I've come to learning about Mormonism is the Book of Mormon, and that is just hilarious. But I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. And again, I can't stress the fact enough that because it's not a supernatural movie, I loved it even more.
Right. I agree. I did recommend this movie to people already before we've recorded it. It was very good. It's very good for the horror genre. It's one of the better movies I think we've seen all year.
Yeah.
At least myself. The next one we review I think is probably the best one I've seen all year. But I'll save that for next episode. But I thought this movie was really good, man. And it's A24 is the king right now. It's pretty hard for them to not make something good. Even their movies that are not supposed to be big blockbusters. Like, this was released on Election Day, or the same week as Election Day, and I think it's probably outperformed the numbers they were anticipating with it. I would assume you're not releasing your big project movie on a time where everyone's going to be looking at politics, but I don't know. That's the full extent of politics you'll get on this show.
Maybe it's the perfect time to release this movie, honestly, but
yeah. I don't know. It wasn't overly marketed, though. I didn't see a massive campaign for it, but it's really fucking good. I've told people to watch it. It's gonna test all your buttons with a nice horror movie, but it's not overly grotesque. It's not a slasher by any means, and I think that psychological horror does a lot more. In my opinion, it's a lot more impressive. Anybody can just create, Thanksgiving Day Christopher Columbus serial killer, something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
No,
It was a good movie.
Yeah. One thing I will always applaud A24 on is just sticking to their guns and pumping out movies that are kind of out of the box. I mean, I want to say the first A24 movie I ever watched was The Lobster. I don't know if you ever seen that with Colin Farrell.
I've not seen that, no.
Bro.
The first one I saw was Hereditary, and I was like, holy fuck, what is this company?
So the first one I saw
want
was
more.
The Lobster, and it's just like this dystopian type movie. Basically, like you have to find a mate at a certain age, and if you don't, you go to this retreat where they pair you up, and if you don't find a successful mate there, they turn you into an animal of your choice. And it's a very weird movie, but it's so well done. The acting's great, and when I saw it, I was like, A24 does some weird shit here, but like I'm kind of fucking with it. And ever since then, every A24 movie, every trailer that comes out, I'm always watching it. Some of them I'm like, this might be the dumbest movie ever. But again, I'm going to respect them no matter what, because it just, they're...
Blink Twice. That was A24. That was a good movie.
Fucking talk to me.
Yeah, it's a good
Dude,
movie.
love A24. And
they do make the best horror movies by far. Also.
Yeah.
Like Hereditary is the best horror movie I've ever seen in terms of, I mean, that's
Talk to Me is one of my favorite horror movies of all time.
Yeah. I think because they just will do weird shit. They will step outside the box. They're not afraid to tackle any issue. They're tackling religion here. So they're cutting off a huge portion of the population that won't probably watch this because they're believers in their religion of their choice. Whatever. Yeah. Like, we're not anti-religion on this podcast. It's just, we're not probably super religious, and we're going to watch mostly anything. I'm not going to get offended by it, but they're taking a big leap of faith there by doing that, no pun intended. And they can just make anything really work. And I think we're seeing so much shit that's just recycled plot lines. Shout out Disney. You guys fucking suck right now.
For real.
And
Marvel.
A24 would never... Yeah, A24 would never pay for just a rerun or a rendition of the same thing that's already been done. They're all original scripts, and yeah, they might be weird, and you might be like, okay, it's not hero meets villain, hero gets the girl, hero drives off into the sunset. It's gonna be way different than that. You're gonna see
I mean, literally this movie, depending on how you view the ending, this movie was literally like everyone's dead. That's how you could take it. Also, I will say this movie does a great job of not... It is a religious movie, and I see what you're saying by it can turn off a lot of people because it speaks on religion throughout the whole movie. But it does a good job of not being anti-religious either. Because the dialogue that Hugh Grant's character has with both the Mormon girls is an amazing conversation, really, about testing their faith, testing their beliefs, and like the girls sticking to their guns while he's trying to control them, manipulate them, and make them believe something else. So, I mean, like, whether you are, like, I mean, Grant, you shouldn't be. Honestly, I'm not even going to touch on religion anymore besides that, but...
It's all left up for interpretation.
Exactly.
Is what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is. So that leaves us with a final score here of an 8.1, which is another high score that will probably be top 5 on our movies so far. This is, again, our 23rd rated movie. Not 23 out of 23, but the 23rd one we've done. All of those movie reviews can be found on our website, which will be linked in our bio. And if you like this video, be sure to leave it a like, tell a friend, subscribe to the YouTube, check out our socials, do everything if you want to. No one's going to force you to do that. Only Hugh Grant is going to force you to do that by your own will. So think for yourself.
And Shades is going to be that Ben is going to be that Hugh Grant character if you don't subscribe. So
Yeah, stay tuned for that. And we will be back next week with the potential movie of the year. And until next time.
Deuces.
I dream of the places I've been with you. How we sat with the stream flowing